Jai Shri Krishna, Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita, Ganadhar, Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Yeah, when there's a difficult situation, you can feel the pressure. The solution isn't always the immediate response isn't always the best one. Unless it's a life-threatening situation. Then the adrenaline kicks in and you just do whatever it is you have to do. But usually if it's a difficult situation, socially or economically or even health-wise, if it's not like a total emergency in the moment, the actual path to take, at least my experience is, it's not clear right away. And you have to kind of sit with it a while and sleep on it. And then it starts to clear up a little bit. And at least me, I'm slow to process these things. And I find an immediate reaction to everything is not the most successful. So I welcome these situations. They can be very uncomfortable, very disturbing, and it can go on for a day, a week, however long it can go on until it clears and you begin to understand in the light of Krishna consciousness what's really going on, and then it's possible to take appropriate action in the mood of devotional service to Krishna. So I'm like really slow. I mean super slow. You know how computers, they have processors, and some of them are really fast? Well, this one's like, it's from 1980 when they first invented computers. I mean, it's slow. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Krishna Chaitanya. Yeah, I couldn't chant using the bead bag anymore because I found that I wasn't moving along the beads. I was chanting on the same bead like 20 times, kind of spaced out, Hare Krishna, and instead of moving along to do the round, I'm just on the same bead. It's in the bag, I can't see. So if the beads are out, I have some visual control over the situation, and I get, oh, okay, next bead, oh, okay, next bead. So I need that visual attention, as well as touching, hearing, speaking. I need another sense engaged here to stay on track, and that's seeing. So they have to be out of the bag so I can see. Hare Krishna, okay, next beat, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Otherwise, it's like one round an hour because I'm still on the same bead after 20 mantras if it's in the bag. But if I go out, in public, and I take my beads with me, they'll be in the bag. So, Hare Krishna. How about something, read today something technical about our situation in the material world. And as I heard, this is the 10th canto summary study by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Summary study of the 10th canto. As I heard it explained so nicely a little while ago, what do we have to study detailed stuff about the material world for? We're not these bodies. And it was explained because we're in this situation. We are in a material body right now. And we happen to be very concerned about it. How to make the material body comfortable. We tend to be very material body conscious. So it helps us to hear about the actual situation. And in that way, we can actually appreciate the transcendence and ultimately enter into a personal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is totally beyond anything material. He's not influenced by the material situation at all. Hare Krishna. He's the creator, the controller, the maintainer, because of the desires of the infinitesimally small living entities to try to control, enjoy his energy without him. It's a very old problem. It's the root of the problem. So this is prayers by the Personified Vedas. In this edition of Krishna book, it's chapter 86. And the original question by Maharaj Parikshit was to his spiritual master Sukadeva Goswami, is how is it possible to describe or talk about anything beyond the material world with material senses and a material mind and material words? How is it possible? So this kind of question has gone on at different times on different planets, and there's been much discussion about this. And from that question there comes another one, is that, well, if there is something beyond the material situation, is it just energy, or is there a conscious entity there? So that's the kind of discussion that goes on. And the prayers offered by the Personified Vedas are the answer. And these prayers are being quoted intermittently. It's a very long chapter. And Prabhupada's giving much purport on everything. These prayers are offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead when it's time for him to recreate the material universes. They're manifest sometimes, sometimes they're not. So, hey, Hare Krishna, Lance. Hare Krishna. Thanks for dropping by. We're going to do something detailed here. Continue with the Hare Krishna. Yes, it is a good morning. Because it's another opportunity to be Krishna conscious. So that makes it a very good morning. And so this is prayers by the Personified Vedas. And the discussion is continuing about personal or impersonal. And these are the prayers that are offered to Lord Vishnu when it's time for him to reawaken and manifest the whole material phantasmagoria, material playground for the materially conditioned souls to have something to romp around in, to act out their fantasies. This is like, material creation is like Fantasy Island. Hare Krishna. Okay. Krishna advises everyone just to surrender unto him alone. And that is the way of Vedic instruction. Since Krishna is the cause of all causes, and is not different from his name, Krishna. He is worshipped by all kinds of sages and saints by observance of regulative principles. When there's a necessity for meditation, great personalities meditate on the transcendental form of Krishna within the heart. In this way, the minds of great personalities are always engaged in Krishna. With minds engaged in Krishna, naturally, the captivated devotees simply talk of Krishna. Talking of Krishna or singing of Krishna is called kirtan. Prabhupada called the printing press the big mridanga. So this is Krishna kirtan in a book. Hare Krishna. This is like sheet music. It's meant to be sung. Lord Chaitanya also recommends Kirtaniya Sadahari, which means always thinking and talking of Krishna, of nothing else. Kirtaniya Sadahari, talking and thinking of Krishna and nothing else. That is called Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is so sublime that anyone who takes to this process is elevated to the highest perfection of life, far, far beyond the concept of liberation. In the Bhagavad Gita, therefore, Krishna advises everyone to always think of him, render devotional service to him, worship him, offer obeisances to him. In this way, the devotee becomes fully Krishnaized, and being always situated in Krishna consciousness ultimately goes back to Godhead. So, Prabhupada, one time, the devotee showed him an article that was written about the devotees and Krishna consciousness, and it was not a very favorable article. It was very critical. I don't know the exact details of it, but it really put down, like maybe it was a cult or something. But Prabhupada had the devotees count how many times the name Krishna appeared in this bad article. And it appeared like many, many times. Krishna, no good. Krishna, bad. Krishna, 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 Krishna. And Prabhupada said, this is a good article. They'll forget what they're saying about Krishna, and they'll just remember Krishna. This is a very good article. So I'm looking at this paragraph. In this one paragraph alone, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. It's only like 3 or 4 sentences. Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. Although the Vedas have recommended worship of different demigods as part and parcels of Krishna, so we were distributing these books to the public. We would go through the streets, go to the airports. It has beautiful pictures. It looks like stories. But when somebody reads this, what are they hearing? Every paragraph, Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. They may not understand what's being said about Krishna, but they're getting the holy name 2, 3 times in a sentence. Baba said, this is the big mridanga. This is printing press. This is Krishna Kirtan. Krishna. Everything Krishna. Although the Vedas have recommended worship of different demigods as different parts and parcels of Krishna, it is to be understood that such instructions are meant for less intelligent men who are still attracted by material sense enjoyment. But the person who actually wants perfect fulfillment and the mission of human life should simply worship Lord Krishna, and that will simplify the matter and completely guarantee the success of his human life. Although the sky, the water, and the land are part and parcel of the material world, when one stands on the solid land, his position is more secure than when he stands in the sky or the water. An intelligent person, therefore, does not stand under the protection of different demigods. Interesting how Prabhupada relates that to the demigods, because there are different demigods in charge of the land, the sky, and the water. An intelligent person, therefore, does not stand under the protection of different demigods, although they are part and parcel of Krishna. Rather, he stands on the solid ground of Krishna consciousness. That makes his position sound and secure. Impersonalists sometimes give the example that if one stands on a stone or piece of wood, one actually stands on the surface of the land, because the stone and wood are both resting on the surface of the earth. But it may be replied that if one stands directly on the surface of the earth, he's more secure than on the wood or stone, which are resting on the earth. In other words, taking shelter of Paramatma, or taking shelter of impersonal Brahman, is not as secure a course as taking direct shelter of Krishna in Krishna consciousness. Wow, another beautiful image Prabhupada's comparing, because the impersonal Brahman and Paramatma, they are manifestations of Krishna, but they're not directly Krishna. Just like standing on a stone or a piece of wood, you're standing on the earth, but it can be pretty wobbly. It's not as secure as actually taking shelter of the ground, the earth. The position of the jnanis and yogis is therefore not as secure as the position of the devotees of Krishna. Jnanis they head for the impersonal Brahman, and the yogis, they head for Paramatma. They're just standing on wood or stone, but not actually connected directly with Krishna. Lord Krishna has therefore advised in the Bhagavad Gita, that only a person who has lost his senses takes to the worship of demigods. That's interesting. He's lost his senses. They're looking for sense gratification by taking shelter of the demigods. But Prabhupada here says they've lost his sense. He's lost his senses. He's lost his spiritual senses. Takes to the worship of demigods. And regarding persons who are attached to impersonal Brahman, Prabhupada is really taking jabs here. The Srimad Bhagavatam says, "My dear Lord, those who are thinking of themselves as liberated by mental speculation are not yet purified of the contamination of material nature because of their inability to find the shelter of your lotus feet. Although they rise to the transcendental situation of existence in impersonal Brahman, they certainly fall from that exalted position because they have neglected to desire your lotus feet." Yeah, by mental activity alone, someone is able to realize everything is spiritual. That realization, or the Brahman, can actually be realized through meditation. But they can't remain there because there's nothing to do there. And the nature of the soul is to be active. So they can hang out there for a while, but they can't stay there. So they fall from that. Lord Krishna therefore advises that the worshippers of the demigods are not very intelligent persons because they derive only temporary, exhaustible results. Their endeavors are those of less intelligent men. But the Lord assures that his devotee has no fear of falling. Yeah, worshipping the demigods, you attain the planets of the demigods. Krishna explains that in Bhagavad Gita. But you can't stay there either. You can't stay in the Brahmajyoti, and you can't stay in the heavenly planets. Because life there is not eternal. And then where do you go when that lovely demigod, heavenly planet situation is over? You have to come back down. Because you get there by pious credits. You've used your pious credits. It's like a person works all year for a week's vacation. And they go someplace for a fancy hotel on the beach or in the mountains or on a cruise. But then they run out of money. They have to go back to work. The personified Vedas continue to pray. So they're waking the Lord up, and this is a prayer they're offering. Dear Lord, considering all points of view, if one has to worship someone superior to him, then just out of good behavior, one should stick to the worship of your lotus feet, because you are the ultimate controller of creation, maintenance, and dissolution. You are the controller of the three worlds, Bur, Bhuvar, and Swar, upper, middle, and lower. You are the controller of the 14 upper and lower worlds. You are the controller of the three material qualities. Demigods and persons advanced in spiritual knowledge are always engaged in hearing and chanting about your transcendental pastimes, because this has the specific potency of nullifying the accumulated results of sinful life. Intelligent persons factually take a dip in the ocean of your nectarine activities and very patiently hear of them. Thus, they immediately become freed from the contamination of material qualities. They do not have to undergo severe penances and austerities for advancement of spiritual life. This chanting and hearing of your transcendental pastimes is the easiest process for self-realization. Simply by submissive, oral reception of the transcendental message, one's heart becomes cleansed of all dirty things. Thus, Krishna consciousness becomes fixed in the heart of a devotee. So that's the prayer of the personified Vedas. And now they continue. Interesting, they cite Bhishmadev. Oh well. The great authority Bhishmadev has also given the opinion that this process of chanting and hearing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the essence of all Vedic ritualistic performances. Dear Lord, the devotee who wants to elevate himself simply by this process of devotional activities, especially by hearing, chanting, very soon comes out of the clutches of the dualities of material existence. By this simple process of penance and austerity, chanting Hare Krishna is a simple process of penance and austerity. I can kind of relate to that, just trying to get these 16 rounds every day. It does seem to have a little bit of a penance and austerity mood to it. By this simple process of penance and austerity, the super soul within the devotee's heart becomes very pleased and gives the devotee directions so that he may go back home, back to Godhead. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita that one who engages all his activities and senses in devotional service of the Lord becomes completely pacified, because the Supreme Soul, Super Soul, is satisfied with him. Thus, the devotee becomes transcendental to all kinds of dualities: heat, cold, honor, dishonor. Being freed from all dualities, he feels transcendental bliss. They like me, they don't like me. Free from all dualities. And he no longer suffers cares and anxieties due to material existence. Bhagavad Gita confirms that the devotee who is always absorbed in Krishna consciousness has no anxieties for his maintenance or protection. Being constantly absorbed in Krishna consciousness, he ultimately achieves the highest perfection. While in the material existence, he lives very peacefully and blissfully without any cares and anxieties. And after quitting this body, he goes back home, back to Godhead. So that's a promise that's being made to those that take up this process. You take up this process, even while in this material world, you'll live very peacefully and blissfully without any cares or anxieties. And quitting this body, you go back home, back to Godhead. Prabhupada's making that promise. Krishna makes that promise. The Lord confirms in Bhagavad Gita, my supreme abode is a transcendental place where, going, no one returns to this material world. Anyone who attains the supreme perfection, being engaged in my personal devotional service in the eternal abode, reaches the highest perfection of human life and doesn't have to come back again to the miserable material world. So there's some questions around that, because sometimes devotees ask, what does it mean that we fell? If we were in the spiritual world, and Krishna says, once you go there, you never come back, then we were there, so how did we get here? Krishna said, once you're there, you never come here. But looking at this, all these questions, looking at this, a place where going, no one returns to this material world. And then other devotees argue, well, we've never been there. We've always just been in nowhere land. We weren't in the material world. We weren't in the spiritual world. We were just like in a dormant seed-like state, like forever. Well, that doesn't make any sense. How did we get to the material world? What made us go into the material? So it doesn't make any sense that we were nowhere forever, and then we came here. That's not supported anywhere. I'm looking at this, and what I'm seeing is that being in the spiritual world, there is the opportunity to turn away from Krishna. And when that happens, you have to go somewhere. So here's the material world. But after being here in the material world for a very long time, going through the cycle of birth, and then getting the opportunity to go home, having had this experience, being enriched by it, having exercised our free will to turn away from Krishna, and then also exercised our free will to turn back to Krishna, we're not inclined to do that again. Having once gone, and never return. You know, it's kind of like, been there, done that, no thanks. So I'm thinking that's the answer to those questions that get raised. Well, if we were there, why did we leave if it was so nice? Hare Krishna. So that makes sense when Krishna says, my supreme abode is a transcendental place where going, no one returns to the material world. Anyone who attains the supreme perfection, be engaged in my personal devotional service in the eternal abode, reaches the highest perfection of life and doesn't have to come back again to the miserable material world. Anyway, I'll stay with that for now. If something else comes up that makes more sense to me, then, but that makes a lot of sense to me. That we were there, we turned away from Krishna. We have that, it's part of our nature. We're created like that because we're like Krishna, we have free will. And we can turn away to try to exercise it independently. And when we have that attitude, it makes a big stink in the spiritual sky. It has to be excreted. Into the pooper, material cesspool, material septic system. We get excreted. They're making a stink, so we get excreted. Krishna. So the Personified Vedas continue. My dear Lord, it is imperative that the living entities be engaged in Krishna consciousness, always rendering devotional service by prescribed methods such as hearing and chanting and executing your orders. If a person is not engaged in Krishna consciousness and devotional service, it is useless for him to exhibit symptoms of life. Prabhupada said he looked around, all the materialists running here and there, just simply flapping dead bodies. They're just flapping dead bodies. There's no real life in there. It is useless for him to exhibit symptoms of life. What's the use? Generally, it is accepted if a person is breathing, he's alive. But a person without Krishna consciousness may be compared to a bellows in a blacksmith shop. The big bellows is a bag of skin which exhales and inhales air. And a human being who is simply living within the bag of skin and bones without taking to Krishna consciousness and loving devotional service is no better than the bellows. Simply, a non-devotee's long duration of life is compared to the long existence of a tree, his voracious eating capacity compared to the eatings of dogs and hogs, and his enjoyment in sex life, I'm not going to pantomime that one, is compared to that of dogs and goats. Just have to use your own visual acuity. The cosmic Vedas Personified continue. The cosmic manifestation has been possible because of the entrance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as Mahavishnu within the material world. The total energy, material energy, becomes agitated by the glance of Mahavishnu, and only then does the interaction of the three material qualities begin. Becomes agitated by the glance of the Lord. Glances over the material energy. Maya. He glances over Maya. He doesn't interact with Maya. He simply glances at Maya. Therefore, it should be concluded that whatever material facilities we're trying to enjoy are available only to the mercy of Supreme Personality of Godhead. They're praying like this. Hare Krishna. Within the body, there are 5 different departments of existence known as Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, and Anandamaya. I've heard Manomaya also in Bhagavad Gita, it's Jnanamaya. Here it's Manomaya. It's the activities of the mind. Yeah, this is a paragraph very similar to what's in a purport in the Gita. In the beginning of life, every living entity is food conscious. A child or an animal is satisfied only by getting nice food. The stage of consciousness in which the goal is to eat sumptuously is called Annamaya. Anna means food. So Annamaya. I exist because I'm eating. After this, one lives in the consciousness of being alive. If one can continue his life without being attacked or destroyed, one thinks himself happy. This is called pranamaya, or consciousness of existing. After this stage, when one is situated on the mental platform, the consciousness is called Manomaya. The material civilization is primarily situated in these three stages: Annamaya, Pranamaya, and Manomaya. Eating, existing, and mental activity. The first concern of civilized persons is economic development. The next concern is defense against being annihilated. And the next consciousness is mental consciousness, the philosophical approach to the values of life. So that corresponds with Annamaya, economic development, Pranamaya, defense. Look at the huge defense budgets of all these different countries. And mental speculation, Manomaya. That's material existence. So the other two levels, Vijnanamaya and Anandamaya, it's not available in a material situation. If by the evolutionary process of philosophical life, one happens to reach the platform of intellectual life and understands he's not the material body, but is spirit, soul, then by evolution of spiritual life he comes to the understanding of the Supreme Lord or the Supreme Soul. So that's the beginning. Aham Brahmasmi, I'm spirit. Not ahamkara. Ahamkara is I am this body. Aham Brahmasmi is I'm spirit. So that's the beginning. And when someone asks the question, why am I suffering? After they've tried to take advantage of Annamaya, Pranamaya, and Manomaya, and they can't solve their problems and they're still suffering. So then they may ask the question, why am I suffering? And then philosophically, they're open to begin to realize that they're spirit, they're not matter. And that's the problem. That's why they're suffering, identifying with the material situation. When one develops his relationship with Him, the Lord, and executes devotional service, that stage of life is called Krishna consciousness. That's the Anandamaya stage. Ananda. Anandamaya is the blissful life of knowledge and eternity. As it is said in Vedanta Sutra, Anandamaya Vyasat. The Supreme Brahman and the subordinate Brahman, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entities, are both joyful by nature. As long as the living entities are situated in the lower four stages of life, Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, and Vijnanamaya, they are considered to be in the material situation of life. Prabhupada didn't elaborate on Vijnanamaya. He talked about the other ones. They are to be considered in material condition of life, but as soon as one reaches the stage of Anandamaya, he becomes a liberated soul. This Anandamaya stage is explained in Bhagavad Gita as Brahmabhuta. There it is said that in the Brahmabhuta stage of life, there's no anxiety, no hankering. This stage begins when one becomes equally disposed towards all living entities. It then expands to the stage of Krishna consciousness, in which one always hankered to render service to the personality of Godhead. Equally disposed to all living entities. Equally disposed. This hankering for advancement in devotional service is not the same as hankering for sense gratification in material existence. In other words, hankering remains in spiritual life, but it becomes purified. When our senses are purified, they become freed from all material stages, namely Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manamaya, and Vijnanamaya. And they become situated in the highest stage, Anandamaya, or blissful life in Krishna consciousness. The Mayavadi philosophers consider Anandamaya to be the state of being merged in the Supreme. To them, Anandamaya means that the Supersoul and the individual soul become one. No more individuality. You just kind of like dissolve into spirit. But the real fact is that oneness does not mean merging or dissolving into the Supreme and losing one's own individual existence. Merging in the spiritual existence is the living entity's realization of qualitative oneness with the Supreme Lord in his eternity and knowledge aspects. That's all they get, is eternity and knowledge. Knowledge that I'm spirit, the ultimate source of everything is spiritual in nature, and I'm merging with that. That's all they get. And they can't stay there either, but that's what they get. But the actual Anandamaya blissful stage is obtained when one is engaged in devotional service. Keep your individuality and engage in serving, loving service to the source. That is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Mad bhaktim labhate param. The Brahmabhuta Anandamaya stage is complete only when there is exchange of love between the Supreme and the subordinate living entities. Unless one comes to this Anandamaya stage of life, his breathing is like the breathing of a bellows in a blacksmith shop. His duration of life is like that of a tree, and he's no better than the lower animals, like the camels, hogs, and dogs. All right, continuing on with Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manamaya, Vijnanamaya, and Anandamaya, and is that the last one? No, Anandamaya. What was the last one? Hare Krishna. Yeah, okay. Yeah, Anandamaya is the last one. There's a little bit more, continuing on with this. Undoubtedly, this is Prabhupada speaking. Undoubtedly, the living entity cannot be annihilated at any point. But the lower species of life exist in material condition. Whereas one who is engaged in devotional service of the Supreme Lord is situated in the pleasurable or Anandamaya status of life. You know, I heard Prabhupada said something kind of makes you scratch your head for a minute. He said, you know, even if there isn't any Krishna, isn't this a nice way to live? Even if there isn't any Krishna. Hare Krishna. Prabhupada. I was reminded of that reading this sentence. Undoubtedly, the eternal living entity cannot be annihilated, but the lower species of life exist in miserable condition, whereas those one engaged in devotional service of the Supreme Lord is in the pleasurable Anandamaya status of life. Isn't this a nice way to live? The different stages described above are all in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although in all circumstances there exist both the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entities, the difference is that the Supreme Personality of Godhead always exists in the Anandamaya stage, whereas the subordinate living entities because of their minute position as fragmental portions of the Supreme Lord, are prone to fall to the other stages of life. Although in all the stages, both the Supreme Lord and the living entities exist, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is always transcendental to our concept of life, whether we are in bondage or in liberation. The whole cosmic manifestation becomes possible by the grace of the Supreme Lord. It exists by the grace of the Supreme Lord, and when it's annihilated, it merges into the existence of the Supreme Lord. As such, the Supreme Lord is the supreme existence, the cause of all causes. Therefore, the conclusion is that without development of Krishna consciousness, one's life is simply a waste of time. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. In the material world, time is very valuable. They say things like time is money. It has value. In the spiritual world, it's conspicuous by its absence, because everything is in the eternal present. It's hard for us to understand that there's no time in the spiritual world. Krishna. But it's very valuable, especially to have human life with a lifespan measured in time. So without developing Krishna consciousness, it's a waste of something very valuable. I also said that it's so valuable that you can't even get one moment back once it's gone. There's no way to get it back. It's gone. So without developing Krishna consciousness, life is simply a waste of time. Flapping dead bodies. Bellows with air going in and out. Dogs and hogs. Oh, Krishna. Prabhupada said it's emergency. Hare Krishna, I did anything wrong. I accepted a lot of unqualified disciples. But what could I do? It was an emergency. I remember there's one initiation that took place that they'd never even seen this person before. And he approached Prabhupada. He wanted initiation. Prabhupada said, who is God? Does God exist? Yes. Who is God? The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Okay, your name is such and such. Here should be 16 rounds, 4 regular principles. It was an initiation that took place like that. You believe in God? Yes. Who's God? Krishna. Okay, here you go. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. I didn't know. What could I do? It was an emergency. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna, Krishna. What page am I on? Oh, you want to be on the same page? We're on the same page, Lance Prabhu. I don't know what volume you have. There's different editions, different printings. This is the all-in-one edition. All 3 parts of the Krishna book are in this. And it's page 627. That's where I ended. Hare Krishna. Whoa! Krishna. 24/7, 16/4. It's the magic combination. It's like there's a great treasure locked away, and the combination is 16/4, 24/7. 16/4, 24/7. Unlock the treasure. Prabhupada's giving the combination. Here you go, here's the combination. Unlock the treasure. Hare Krishna. So that's nice to know. This is the Sankirtan movement, and this is Kirtan. Hare Krishna. Out in the street with drums is good too. Prabhupada said out in the street with drums and clangers, it can be heard for a few blocks. That's good. It's really good. He said, but this can go anywhere in the world. This is kirtan. It can go anywhere in the world. It can be heard. And it doesn't just last for a few minutes. It's resounding. Hare Krishna. Yeah. But street kirtan's nice too. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Baba.